Hey guys, so we're gonna hit the ground running and get started talking about our first graded assignment, which is the textual analysis exercise. I talked about this a little bit in the introduction to the course video. There's also more about it in the syllabus, but your best place to look when it comes to what is expected of you in this assignment is at the materials on our course modules page. So there you will find the prompt, you will find the grading criteria. I posted some examples of successful student responses from last semester, and that's also where you'll find the submission links. When we get there, that's where peer review and any other revision materials will be. So feel free to open up some of these documents and follow along while I talk through this assignment. So some general details: the rough draft is going to be due Wednesday, the 27th of January, and then the final draft is going to be due the following Wednesday, February 3rd. I'm asking that both of these get submitted by 8 a.m. Make sure you always take a look at what time assignments are due, because that will vary based on assignment. I'm asking for these by 8 a.m. because everybody's going to get written feedback by Friday, 11:59 p.m. So if I have them early Wednesday, that gives me a couple days to get that feedback to you. If the assignment is submitted later, again, don't let it happen. Then you're going to get into losing credit and stuff. But if it's submitted later, you can assume that you're going to get your feedback later as well. So you want to get that feedback by the end of the week so you have plenty of time to revise, and therefore you want to make sure you get it handed in on time. Other submission details: there will be an assignment link on Canvas. That's how where all of our graded assignments will get submitted. Everything gets run through Turnitin, which is a plagiarism checker, and I also use the grading function right in Canvas. So that's where I will give feedback and post the letter grade on the assignment. So it's important that you're using the assignment links rather than like sending it to me through email or something like that. The deadline is getting the finished file uploaded to the assignment link. Submit everything as Word documents, so .doc or .docx. Again, just because Canvas reads that file type, Turnitin reads that file type. I actually have it restricted, I believe, if I did it correctly, so that you can only upload Word docs. Even if you don't type in Microsoft Word, you should be able to save your file, export your file as a .doc or as a .docx. If you need help doing that, if you have any questions, reach out to me sooner rather than later. Also, Google is your best friend. So you could always Google, how do I export Pages document as a Word doc? Or how do I export Google Docs as a Word doc? Or something like that. Both drafts must be between 500 and 700 words. And I have a note that means 500 to 700 words of your own content. So not like 500 words counting the heading and the works cited page and everything else, but like your paragraph responses should be 500 to 700 words. Proofread, copy, and cite quotations carefully and accurately, and use MLA style roughly. So like 1-inch margins, double spaced, size 12 times New Roman, number the pages, have the proper heading. Again, you could Google those rules. You could reach out to me with questions. I am happy to clarify any of that stuff. So what you're going to be doing in this assignment is analyzing two passages from our first text. So the first text is Franklin Foer's Mark Zuckerberg's War on Free Will. This should be somewhat familiar to you from the first week writing sample. I did pull different passages. So yeah, by the time you do the first week writing sample and look over this TAE prompt, you will have a good, hopefully, taste of what Foer's text is about. So the instructions: what are you being asked to do? So you're given two passages, and I'm asking you to write two analyses, one of passage 1, one of passage 2. You can and should think of those as two separate analyses, right? So unlike an essay where I would expect like coherence between the two, where I would expect like a common argument, line of reasoning, where I would expect you to, one to flow into the next one, that's not the case with this first assignment. This first assignment is just like a chance to practice your textual analysis skills so that you have them by the time we get to essay 1. So again, 2 passages, 2 analyses, right? Don't think of these as part of the same project. You can make totally different kinds of claims, look at totally different kinds of terms. I encourage you to do that. So in addition to analyzing the 2 passages, a big thing you want to keep in mind in this assignment and throughout all of your writing in this class is that you want to be analyzing rather than summarizing. So that means you should spend very, very little time telling me, here's what 4 is saying, here's what this passage is about. Instead, you should be honing in on particular bits of language, particular details, and telling me something about them that is not already obvious to the average reader, right? So you could get into what are the different things these key terms could mean? Why might 4 have chosen to present it in this way or to use this word to refer to it? What seems to be his purpose here? What kind of message does this send to an audience? Who might he be reaching out to in a moment like this? How effective would this be at delivering a particular message? What kind of effect does it create? So again, you are analyzing the text. You are telling me things about it that go beyond explaining a summary of it, right? I should learn something from your analysis that I couldn't have taken away from just reading 4 on his own. And again, think of this as practice for our eventual essays. So our eventual essays are going to have an introduction where you give me a thesis and then body paragraphs where you're analyzing evidence like this. Think of these as like body paragraphs in isolation, right? So you don't have a thesis, you don't have the structure of a whole paper, but you're showing me that you do know how to select evidence and talk about it in the way that's going to be expected of you in the body paragraphs of our essays. I give you a suggested structure, and I think if you follow this suggested structure, you're going to be much more likely to do well on this assignment. So I strongly suggest starting with a key term, right? Choose a word or a phrase in the passage that you can focus on throughout your analysis, throughout your paragraph. So we always want to be zooming into bits of evidence, honing in on pieces of evidence, specific details. Identify a key term as a way of doing that. So a strong response would start with a topic sentence that right away pulls out some key term, some key phrase that you're going to talk about in the body of this paragraph. The strongest key terms tend to have some ambiguity of meaning. And what I mean by ambiguity is their meaning isn't absolute or concrete, right? So like the word Facebook would not be a great key term because Facebook is what Facebook is, right? Whereas a word like if somebody said Facebook is useful or Facebook is helpful, right? Words like useful and helpful now have a bit more ambiguity, right? Useful for who? Useful in what ways? Are they actually helpful? Who is using and who is being used in this situation? Why would 4 have used a word like useful? Or why would 4 have quoted Zuckerberg as using a word like useful? So you want to choose terms that allow you to play with meaning in that way, because that's going to be the analytical discussions that you're having in your paragraphs. So once you have a strong topic sentence, here is the key term I'm going to be looking at. Here's what it means in the context of the passage. You then want to connect it to other bits of evidence within that same passage. So I would say point to 1 or maybe 2, but no more than 2 other quotes, keep the quotes brief, that you can somehow use to connect to this key term or phrase that you've identified. So maybe the key term helps you understand this moment differently. Maybe the moment helps you understand the key term differently. Maybe the moment you connect to helps you explain your inference as to why 4 used that term or how you know what he means when he uses that term. So topic sentence that identifies and defines a key term. Again, look for something with ambiguity, something you could talk about. Connect it to 1 or 2 quotes from that passage and talk about what those connections are, why they're important, why you want your reader to notice them. And then finally, connect this mini discussion to kind of the passage as a whole or For's text as a whole. How does your little mini analysis help us better understand this passage, help us better understand For's overall argument, right? Another way to think about that last section where you're connecting to kind of a bigger picture is, what has your analysis taught us or helped us see, helped us understand that wasn't already obvious from reading For alone? So topic sentence with a key term, connect it to a piece of evidence or two, and then connect it to the larger passage, the text as a whole. You're going to do that for passage 1. You're going to do that for passage 2. Okay. Like I said, you're likely going to be pulling out 2 totally different key terms, making totally different observations, totally different arguments. There is no pressure that those 2 paragraphs resemble each other. Okay. Things to avoid: don't summarize. Don't try to address every single detail in the passage. That's probably going to lead to a very unfocused, kind of surface level discussion. I always say you want to think about saying more about less. So looking at fewer pieces of evidence and having lengthier, more detailed discussions about them. So you could have a whole paragraph that really is just focusing in on one particular word, right? And the way For is using it and why he's using it, how it would come off to an audience, how it affects the meaning of the passage, things like that. Don't reference other specific parts of For's essay that aren't in the passage. So you're given this little baby chunk of text. Don't go and quote from a different page. Don't go and connect to specific details on a different page. I would say you could connect to kind of general ideas in his overall argument. That was sort of that last step that I mentioned in the suggested structure. But you don't want to be, again, pointing to super specific things. Assume that your reader only has that passage to work with, right? So really try to keep the specific discussion, the specific evidence to stuff related or that appears in that passage. And don't reference non-textual examples. So like you shouldn't be citing facts from the outside world, right? This is about, can you zoom into this text and talk about this text? This is not like a research paper. This is not like a personal reflection paper, right? You really shouldn't have to engage at all, really, with information from outside of these 2 passages. Okay, so you have passage 1, which is from pages 105 to 106, passage 2 from page 110. These are all coming from, for now, probably from the PDF that's posted to Canvas, but if you have the 6th edition of the New Humanities Reader, the page numbers should be the same. So feel free to use your own version or the PDF that I've uploaded. Really quickly, I'd like us to take a look at the grading criteria. So you can receive one of 4 grades for this assignment. You can receive a high pass, a low pass, or a no pass. I'm not going to go through every single detail of this rubric. I would say I encourage you to, and if you attend a meeting next week or you want to email me or come to office hours, feel free to ask about this rubric in more detail. But basically it follows the structural suggestions I was making. So starting with strong topic sentences, connecting to other specific pieces of evidence, explaining what those connections are, providing original insights and commentary rather than just summarizing, right? And if you're doing those things, then you could get a high pass, right? If you're doing some of those things kind of imperfectly, maybe you're slipping into summary, maybe it's not clear what the connections are, maybe you choose key terms that don't leave you a lot to talk about, maybe now you're in like the pass range. Low pass is like you've pretty much met the bare minimum requirements, but you're not, your key terms aren't clear, or you're engaging with a loose concept but not an actual explicit term from the passage, right? And then not passing would be like you're missing some major element that's required in the assignment. Again, I know I ran through that very, very quickly, but feel free to reach out with additional questions about that, or at the very least, look it over on your own time. And the very last thing before I wrap this up, I did post some examples of high pass responses from last semester. So they are engaging with a different text. So you'll see the name Stout, you'll see them say she, right? Obviously it's not for, it's not the same passage that they're writing about. But I thought it would be useful seeing the structure of their paragraphs, the kinds of key terms they engage with, the way they connect it to evidence, the way they comment and analyze rather than summarize. These are 4 really strong examples. So like the first one on here engages with the key term suffering, right? Suffering is a strong key term to engage with because it leaves you room to talk about it, right? How do we define suffering? There's different kinds of suffering. There's internal suffering, external suffering. Someone could suffer but be hiding it. Something could cause one person to suffer that doesn't really bother another person, right? Suffering can be short term or it can extend for years over a lifetime, right? So what does the author mean when she uses suffering in this context? Is it too dramatic of a term? Could she have used a more mild term like discomfort, right? Who says this is actually suffering? Maybe she's kind of planting ideas in the reader's head. The next passage looks at the word horror. The next passage looks at reality, misery, right? So what do you mean by reality? Reality for who? What ideas are conjured up when you say a word like horror, right? So again, use these as models for kind of what a successful response looks like and for what rich key terms look like, right? When you are deciding what you want to focus your analyses on, you want to be strategic in the key term or key phrase that you look at, because that's going to really be the basis of how much are you able to say about this in the context of a paragraph. Okay, so like I said, everybody is going to get written feedback from me on this rough draft before the final draft is due. It's a fairly short and sweet assignment. If you recall from the syllabus and from the introduction video, both this assignment and the final interpretive exercise together are going to count as 10% of your grade. So you could think of this as like 5-ish% of your final grade. It's not a huge component, but it is a really good way to familiarize yourself or refamiliarize yourself with the kind of textual analysis that's going to be expected of you once we get to the full-length essays. Okay, so as I said, if any questions come up about this assignment, please don't hesitate to reach out. And otherwise, I look forward to seeing your analyses.